I was mowing my yard one Saturday in the blistering Texas heat. My yard has a 5-foot-high brick retaining wall in front of it, so when I mow along that wall, I try to be as careful as possible because I don't want to fall and bring about my own demise. Unfortunately, on the day in question, I unwisely decided to pirouette on the corner of the retaining wall so I could quickly turn around and mow the next strip of grass. I was about halfway through my pirouette when my foot slipped, and I went tumbling down to the sidewalk. Did I mention the retaining wall is 5 feet high? For some reason, instead of letting go of the lawnmower, I clamped down on it tighter in my rapid descent to the sidewalk. For 5 long feet, I pressed the handle down as if I had been hit by a taser, and the lawnmower continued to vroom and chug. I almost pulled it on top of me before we both hit the sidewalk with a loud thud and a plume of gas. Because of my overly strong need for others to think well of me, the first thing I did when I hit the sidewalk was look up and down the street to see if any of my neighbors had been watching. They've seen me do this kind of thing before. One time, a neighbor saw me with a rope around my waist, hanging outside an upstairs window to clean it and the other upper windows. The other end of the rope was tied to a bedpost inside, although my neighbor did not see that part of my harness. I'm pretty sure my neighbors constantly have their cell phone cameras ready so they can film me doing something truly idiotic. Fortunately, none of them were outside the day of the lawnmower dance with its dramatic ending. Once I hit the ground, I must have finally let go of the handle because the lawnmower was there next to me. If it had been able to speak, it would have said, "You are the biggest idiot on the planet." But it just gave me a shaming look, like some of my other tools tend to do. After a few seconds to collect my thoughts, I stood up, sheepishly grabbed the handle of the lawnmower, went back up to the yard, and started mowing again. But that's not all I did. Not at all. No, I spent the rest of the day shoulding all over myself about what I had done. You should have been more careful. You shouldn't walk that close to the edge of the retaining wall. You shouldn't ever pirouette on the corner of your retaining wall like you're a ballerina. You should let someone else mow your grass if you're not going to be more careful. You should have let go of the handle instead of pulling the lawnmower down with you. You shouldn't have... Rather than accept what I had done and have compassion for myself for doing it, I took myself out behind the woodshed and gave myself a rousing verbal spanking. Sadly, I've spent my life shoulding all over myself. If you're like me, it's highly likely you've spent your life shoulding all over yourself as well. Shoulding is usually best friends with shouldn'ting, as you'll see. Shoulding all over ourselves is a common but unhealthy way we humans shame and condemn ourselves for being imperfect people, living in an imperfect world, full of other imperfect people. Let me give you some examples. I shouldn't have missed my exit is you shaming and condemning yourself for missing your exit because you weren't paying enough attention, probably because you were on your cell phone, and having to find a place to turn around. I should have been on time for the staff meeting is you shaming and condemning yourself for being late for a staff meeting because you don't always watch the clock carefully enough, and sometimes run late to meetings. I shouldn't have eaten 10 bags of M&Ms is you shaming and condemning yourself for sometimes mismanaging your emotions in an unhealthy way. I shouldn't have yelled at my kids for being so rowdy is you shaming and condemning yourself as a parent for occasionally losing your patience with your precious little nose minors when they hang on the ceiling fan and are otherwise out of control, perhaps because they ate 10 bags of M&Ms, which you had stashed for yourself. I should read more books is you shaming and condemning yourself because you haven't read a book in 10 years and aren't as, how shall I say it, enlightened a human being as you could be. I should move to New Zealand and live the good life is you shaming and condemning yourself about the painful reality that you do not live in New Zealand, are never, ever going to live in New Zealand, and forever need to more fully accept and embrace where you have lived, do live, and will continue to live. The flip side of shoulding all over ourselves is that we spend a lot of time shoulding all over others because they're not perfect either. When we should all over others, we're shaming and condemning them for being just as flawed as we are.